Okay, let's have a look at the structure and the function of different types of blood vessels. So we just have a look at this diagram here. We have got showing the double circulatory system. So we've got the heart in the middle and it's pumping blood to the tissues down here, and it's also pumping blood to the lungs up here. Right. Now, the blood vessels which leave the lungs, which leave the heart, carry blood away from the heart, are called arteries. All right. So this artery here, that's the aorta, the biggest artery in the body. It's, I think, about 1.5 centimeters in diameter. Okay, and it carries blood away from the heart, and it splits up into smaller and smaller arteries. Eventually, they're so small they're called arterioles, and then the arterioles split up into even smaller bits. And there we have capillaries, which have the capillary bed in the tissues. Okay, so you think if you prick yourself with a pin anywhere, you'll bleed. So that shows every single little tiny bit of your body is never, more than a fraction of a millimeter away from the capillary. The capillaries are very, very small. There's a red blood cell there, and they are just wide enough to allow one red blood cell at a time to pass through the capillary. And the whole capillary is made up of endothelial cells. You can see the nuclei of those cells there. Yeah, endothelial cells, and see they're very thin, and so the distance between the actual blood and the tissues is very small, so that allows materials to diffuse out of the capillary bed into the tissues, and the other way as well. Okay, so then the capillaries all join up together and eventually form small veins called venules, and then the venules join together to form veins. Okay, there. Veins carry blood back to the heart. Right, now we look at the structure of arteries and veins. They are pretty different. So if we look at the artery up here, there are 3 different layers. The red in the middle, that's the endothelial cells. That's just a 1-cell lining. And the veins also got endothelial cells, you can see there. And then this yellow layer is actually smooth muscle. So that's muscle cells, but you can't control them voluntarily. Okay, it's involuntary muscle. And if you look at the vein, that's also got smooth muscle, but it's a lot thinner. The layer is a lot thinner. And then outside the smooth muscle, both the artery and the vein have got this elastic tissue, and the vein's got it. We can see once again the vein has got much thinner layers of smooth muscle and elastic tissue than the artery, so it's only got thin layers. Now that's due to the way the function of these vessels. So the arteries, the blood is being pumped from the heart directly, so the ventricle is pushing that blood out there. It's under high pressure. The blood is under very high pressure, and so you need those elastic layers to absorb the force of the artery, the force of the heart beating. Otherwise, they could actually burst. Okay, the veins, after the blood has come through the capillary bed, it's broken up into so many different small channels. It's lost the pressure. It's at a much lower pressure, so the walls don't need to be as thick there. The artery also contains a pulse, right? So when the blood leaves the ventricle, a ripple of muscle contraction follows down the artery all the way down, and you can feel your pulse obviously in your wrist, and so that ripple of contraction is coming all the way from the blood leaving the heart all the way down into your arms, and you've got a pulse everywhere. And what happens with the pulse is that's the smooth muscle, it contracts like that, so you've got a bit of a contraction, and that wave of contraction, that's what the pulse is, moves down the artery, squeezing the blood along. Okay, arteries are found usually much deeper down in the body. They're not found near the surface of your skin. Veins are found close to the surface. If somebody cuts an artery, apparently the blood squirts out. It doesn't just ooze out, it squirts out due to the pulse in sort of a rhythmic squirting of the blood coming out. The veins, the blood is under much lower pressure. Okay. Now, what stops the blood going backwards in the veins? Well, there's no pulse, there's no force of heartbeat moving, pushing the blood up here. What causes it is it's the sort of massaging effect of nearby muscles, and the veins contain valves, and the valves only allow the blood to flow in one direction only. So the blood can move back to the heart, it can't move the other way. Arteries don't contain valves. They don't need valves because the blood is under such high pressure being forced along anyway. Right, so if we just have a summary of those things, let's have a look here. What we've got, right. So first of all, the blood leaves the heart in the arteries. I should mention here as well, the arteries nearly always contain oxygenated blood. The only artery that doesn't contain oxygenated blood is, of course, this artery here, the one leaving the heart going to the lungs. That's called the pulmonary artery. Okay. The arteries then break up into arterioles, smaller and smaller. Eventually, they break up into capillaries, and the capillaries there, that you get diffusion. So it's usually oxygen diffusing out of the blood and carbon dioxide diffusing into the blood. But of course, in the lungs, that's reversed. The oxygen diffuses into the blood and the carbon dioxide goes out. And in most tissues, glucose is going to diffuse out. Obviously, in places like the intestines where you're absorbing, that's going to be the other way around as well. The capillaries then join up to form these small veins called venules, and the veins get bigger and bigger, and they're called proper veins then, and then eventually they all get discharged into the right atrium of the heart up there. Okay, let's just summarize the differences between arteries and veins then, which is down here. Right, arteries, they carry blood away from the heart, whereas veins, it's always towards them. Artery is usually oxygenated blood, except the lung artery, which is called the pulmonary artery, carrying blood from the right-hand side of the heart. And the same with the veins, that's nearly always deoxygenated blood, except in the case of the pulmonary vein, which takes blood back to the heart from the lungs. The blood pressure in the artery is very high, and they have elastic walls to be able to cope with that. The vein, the lower pressure, they don't need such thick elastic walls. Arteries can contain a pulse, that's a contraction of the smooth muscle in the artery in a ripple-like effect, and it helps force the blood along. Arteries don't have any valves. Well, veins do have valves because they don't have a pulse, because they're not connected to the heart. You need that to ensure the blood goes back to the heart in the correct direction. Okay.